All right, so in this video, I'm going to show you a little bit about how I would plan a project. Now, with this video, I've used a specific project as an example, but you could use this for any project really you want to use. What we're going to be looking at is how to plan a project, how to break it down into steps, and look at what are the important parts of a project that you're going to want to think about in order to help you essentially have a successful project. So let's have a look at it. So here I've got my mind map and I've got all the different steps of the project, and I talked about all of those in a separate video. You can have a look at that if you want to, and I'll put the link in the description. But in this one, we're going to have a look more at the white parts, which is my examples. So for this particular project, I've used the example of doing, well, actually, let's have a look through it. So this is my project. So I started off with brainstorming, and I'm just going to pick this guy here. Okay, so brainstorming topics. So when I was thinking about what sort of topics I might like to do, let me just straighten that a little bit. Do that. Yeah, I think that'll work, hopefully. Yeah, so when I thought of, I did a brainstorm of a bunch of different topics, okay? So I came up with doing something on breath work. Another topic that I liked was doing something on functional movement, which is something I've been learning about. And another topic that I could potentially do a project on is podcasts, which I've also been working on. So under the breathwork one, I wrote here specifically what I was interested in is what breathing patterns influence mood. So I'm thinking about how I can use breathwork in order to influence mood, and that's really the essence of the project that I'm thinking about here. And I also just put here James Nestor breath because that was a resource that I could use. Now I did the same thing for the functional movement, and this is kind of a mind map, so it flows through. So breath work was one of the topics, and then here I put specifically more information on what I was thinking within breathwork topic. And then the same goes for this next one is functional movement. And the topic that I thought for a project that might be interesting was what exercises will improve functional strength. And one of the resources that I put there is YouTube Moves Method. They're a bunch of couple that do a bunch of different videos on how you can learn to move more effectively. And the third one was my podcast, and specifically with the podcast, I was thinking of I could do a project of what are some of the attributes of a good of a podcast. So maybe that's more of like a research kind of project idea. And I thought some resources I could look at for that was Spotify. Someone like Joe Rogan, who's obviously a very successful podcaster. Theo Von is another one. It doesn't really matter. It just gives you an example of some resources that you might look at if that was your project. So essentially there I've got 3 project ideas, 1, 2, 3, each with a little bit more information and a resource that I could use just to get a bit more information in the early stages of looking at a project. So the reason that I've put the idea there is just so that I can get a bit of a feel for what that project is. And before I choose a project, I probably need to just do a little bit of research. So that's why we've got, for each one of those, we've got a resource or a place where I could learn a bit more about that thing, just to get a sense of, is that going to be something that I actually want to do a8project on or not? All right, so I've got my 3 ideas there. it says here one of the initial things that we could do is do some initial research. So that's why I've got those places that I can look to do some initial research on each of those projects. And once I've done a little bit of research and got a little bit of idea about what each of them are about and what sort of information is available to me, I've got a better idea of what I can, what's probably going to make for a good project. So once I've done that, I'm going to choose a topic. So out of my 3 topics, 1, 2, 3, for this particular one, I have chosen breathwork. So that's going to be my topic that I'm going to do my project on. All right, so what else do we need to look at? Once we've got our topic, we want to have a think about, we want to do a little self-assessment. Now, a self-assessment is just, well, pretty much exactly what it says, an assessment of the self. So I'm going to assess my skills and all the things that I need to do the project so that I can work out ahead of time if I've got things covered or if I might need to do a bit of extra work to make up the gaps for all the skills and things that I'll need for the project. So I've broken this into 3 different areas. We've got knowledge. So I can assess my knowledge relative to the project. So what did I write there? Let's zoom in a little bit. I've got some knowledge of this area. It could improve knowledge of different breathing techniques, but I have got some knowledge because I've done it before. So I would assess my knowledge there as I have some knowledge. Assess my skills. Look, I've been practicing breathwork for years, so I do have quite a lot of skills in this area. So that's going to probably be fairly easily covered for this project. And under skills, I also wrote that there is some inconsistency with my skills. Like there's obviously, I'm not an absolute expert on this. There's things that I don't know. So I just wrote some inconsistency there. So that's just sort of telling me that, yeah, there may be some things that I need to learn along the way while I'm doing this project. The other part of the self-assessment was the interest part. Now I've written, I wrote high. My interest in this area is high. So because I think it's a valuable practice. So it's probably a good project topic for me, because if I'm not interested in it, it's pretty hard to do a good project about something you're not interested in at all. So just check that to make sure that you've picked a project that's going to be of interest to you so that you can do it well. And I just wrote ancient practices there. The reason I wrote that was, I think that's one of the reasons why I think it's really interesting, is because people have been breathing and using breathing for a long, long time. It's just sort of resurfacing now as being a popular thing, but it kind of, I think, hasn't been really talked about much for a good while. And yeah, the practice of breath work, I think, is becoming more prevalent, and people are starting to see the value in it, in these ancient practices again. All right, last part of the initial part, the green. So, all right, then once I've got my topic, I need to do what we're going to call deciding the project idea. Now, what that's about is we need to pick, within the topic, we need to work out what idea or what is it that we actually want to produce with this project. You know, so I just wrote 3 different ideas here that I could choose. So the first idea that I had was I could do 30 days of breath work and document my results. So that could be a project. Another choice that I could do would be make a plan for teaching breath work to groups. So I could make a detailed plan of how I could teach breath work for groups. Or I could make a video showing a breathwork journey. So I've got 3 different ideas there, and I've got to choose which one. I'm actually going to choose this one for this project. So I'm going to make a video showing a breathwork journey. So once I've been through all that, now I've been through, I've got a topic, I've done a bit of a self-assessment on my knowledge and skills to it, and I've also picked a specific project, so I'm going to make a video. So that's really covered off on that brainstorming topics now. So we know what we're doing as a topic.